just went ahead and started it so that I'm getting it ready. We're ready whenever you are.
Good afternoon. I would like to call to order this special meeting of the Encinitas City Council for Wednesday, February 15th, 2024, and we are starting a little late at 4:08 p.m. And if the clerk would please call the roll.
Absolutely. Councilmember Lyons?
Present.
Councilmember Ehlers?
Here.
Councilmember Hinsey?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell?
Here.
Mayor Krantz?
Here.
Record will show that all members of the City Council are present.
Okay, thank you. We are gathered for a single agenda item, and it's a presentation of the City of Encinitas sewer rate cost of service study for the Cardiff Sanitary Division and the Encinitas Sanitary Division. And we're working towards a recommended action of review and discuss the city sewer cost of service study for CSD and ESD. And the second item is to review and discuss the city's capacity fee and sewer rates. And the third item is provide direction to staff on the presented rate scenario and capacity fees and advise staff of changes, if any, desired by council. And with that, I hand it over to the staff dais.
And Mayor, I think I hear an echo coming from the,
We'll be
okay,
taking
cool.
care of that right now.
You don't want to hear me twice. It's bad enough hearing me once.
That's right.
The secret to memorization is repetition, 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 right? So an echo's good. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for joining us again this evening to walk through an updated version of the presentation you saw at your last session dealing with this. Our consultant, Ardura, and their representative, Carmen, is here to walk you through the presentation. We've made a couple updates. You'll recall in the last meeting, we were talking about a 100% scenario and a 75% scenario. We're going to get into that, and also some of the implications of some of the potential scenarios that you all developed in your discussion amongst yourselves. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our representative, Carmen, and she's going to walk you through the presentation.
Thank you, Jared. Mayor, members of council, city staff, yes, I'm Carmen Kasner. I'm the principal on this particular job and the one doing all the work too. So this is the second workshop, and so I don't want to belabor all of the history if you don't need me to, but it's been 2 months since we came to you previously. So the way I set up the presentation was just to go very quickly through the majority of the information and then highlight the differences, and then we've added some more details for the particular scenarios as Jared mentioned. So if I'm taking too long and repeating too much, please let me know, but basically we're doing a cost of service study. It includes many different components, including ops, capital, treatment, and reserves. You bill most of your work through the county tax roll, and capacity fees apply to new construction. It's been many years since you've had a rate study, and so basically ESD has had no increase since 2013. CSD has had increases since through 2019, but they were also very nominal increases. Since the 2009, cost for water and wastewater has gone up dramatically compared to other goods and services. For the city, we've assumed, no more real decrease in wastewater flows. That conservation has already pretty much been handled. We have made some assumptions in inflation. I know there was a lot of debate about that last time. The bottom line, we have a lot of increased treatment costs, and you have infrastructure that's nearing its useful life. So the goal was to always have your revenue match your cost of service. You don't want to have too many reserves, but you want to have enough reserves in case if something happens. You need to be addressing your aging infrastructure and be realistic in your expenditures in the rate study. For the reserves, we basically have used $2.5 million for both Cardiff and Encinitas as the minimum. We aren't getting above, right now we're well above it, but we're drawing those down. And that's been the balance point of drawing them down without drawing them too much. We spent a lot of time talking about the CSD capital improvement program and whether we do a financial plan with 100% funded of the CIP or 75%. I did want to mention at this point in time that the one thing that we didn't emphasize last month, or last time we presented, that could be a key important point for you to consider, is that within the Prop 218 notification process, if you were to not need as much, you can adopt rates for the 5 years, but if you get to year 3 and you're seeing you don't need that much money, you could suspend or lower the rate projections without doing more to Prop 218 notification. So all of these recommendations are up to those percentages, which could, there was a lot of concern, well, are you being too conservative in your CIP? Are you being too conservative with inflation? If we do the Prop 218 notification with these percentages, it can be very clearly written that it's up to those percentages. And it's just a nuance that I did not emphasize last time that we thought is really should be important, should be for your consideration. So yes, in the CSD, we're showing some pretty large increases needed if we project for 100% capital expenditure over time of 15% a year for the next 4 years and 10% in year 5. We can reduce that significantly if we go down to 75% CIP expenditure. That just basically we're saying that we aren't going to probably expend quite as much capital every year. You could make, I've got a slide I put together about that. Again, these are the graphs with the different things. Similar with ESD, capital improvement. We went into a lot of detail last time on the capital program. And similar though, here, up to the 19% could be adopted. And, you'll have the model, or you can, it doesn't cost a lot to have me update it and check it, but you will have the model that if you find that you're not spending as fast, you could change that in the future. These are proposed rates based on those different numbers. So I'm going to spend the most time talking about the 3-year rate option, or one of the first thing we want to spend some time on is talking about a 3-year rate option. So that was discussed as to whether you should do the full 5-year rate or only the 3-year rate. There's basically some different ways you can do it. If you approve only 3 of the year's increases, we would have a deficit in the reserves at that point. Or we could approve a 3-year rate which fully funds it at the ends of 3 years. Tends to be a lot more, but what Carlsbad, I will use for an example, Carlsbad, I believe they did 3 years, even though they knew that they needed future years after that, but they only approved 3 years, but they were not necessarily fully funded at the end of their 3-year. Again, there's 2 different ways we could do it. If we were to be fully funded, which is what you really should be if you want, if you're only going to adopt 3 years, we would need higher increases, quite honestly. Or, as I already mentioned, we could do the up to X percentage rates as an option, because it does allow that as an increase instead. We adopt the 5 years knowing that that's up to this amount for increases, and that would be checked basically every year, but usually after 3 years. Again, I did do the calculations if a 3-year rate and full reserves were met at 100% at 3 years, and that does require some larger increases. Again, I don't think that was what your intention was when we talked about a 3-year rate increase, but I wanted to have the calculations for you. Wanted to talk a little bit more about the different CIP execution rates. The concerns, that you should consider, if you have a lower execution rate, there's not a lot of contingency for higher construction costs. While we've done our best to project consumer price index increases, construction costs not always match consumer price increase. Now we are seeing some constructions coming in flattening a little bit, but it's just different parts of the economy are cooling and inflating at different rates. And so there is a minimum CIP reserve. If you had a major spill or major pump station failure, you're going to be very tight on financials. It's not that it's an issue, but it can make it very tight. As over the period of the time, while you say 75%, if you're still going to execute so much at the end of it, that you still need all those projects done, you're still going to need as much CIP execution, and we don't have the control, as we talked about last time, complete control over what the treatment plants, San Alejo and Encina, do. The bigger concern, I think, for you is that you're just starting some CCTV work, and if you identify significantly more system issues, then if you've assumed 75%, you're going to be that much more tight and risk of times. And then the last thing, as we've said before, this San Alejo and Encina CIP, they have regulatory requirements that we have no control over, that we can't always, that they've got CIP that will need to be done. Should I break before should I continue on to talk about capacity? Continue? I'm going to continue then. So for capacity fees, we talked about it last time, but basically what you have for an existing capacity fee is not been inflated with time and needs to be updated. 3 different ways you can do it: with existing assets, future assets, or using CPI. Future assets is, I think, generally the most appropriate, or CPI. Both of them bring you well within range. This chart I did not have last time. I do have it now. It's regional capacity fees. And, excuse me, dry cough that just won't go away. As you can see, your current capacity fees are at the bottom of the chart, way off to the left. And what we're recommending, puts you somewhere in the middle between $5,000 and $6,000. If we use a future asset methodology, I've left it both ways, existing and one with future. So basically, you're still in the middle of the pack to the lower end of the pack if we go with that capacity fee. Contractors and developers are used to it because that's the cost of doing business. So where do we go from here? If you give us clear direction tonight, then we would present the study at the next council meeting to approve noticing, and we would start the Prop 218 45-day notice, at which time then middle of April to the first meeting in May would be when we would actually have the public hearing to review the protest votes and adopt rates, and then there's a second hearing for the resolution and ordinance. There are some minor ordinance changes we are going to be recommending just to clean things up. For example, it doesn't clearly say that we're using a 5 years average. We've been doing it, but the ordinance doesn't say that it's a 5-year average. There is clarity that we're going to request regarding people that have irrigation meters and how their sewer meters are calculated. Because right now they're done the same, when in reality they should be done differently. So those will be brought forward at a later time, but when we do the public hearing on the protest votes, that will include the ordinance adjustments at that point in time. So I know I kind of went fast, but just to refresh you a little bit.
Remind me what EDUs are.
Equivalent dwelling units. So a single family is one, but then a multifamily, they tend to use less water, so it's a factor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you. Could you just summarize for me what the recommendation then is for rates. And I know you walked through all of our logic behind what we said at our last meeting and how you've presented the information now. And then I think I just missed it in the presentation, what our
Yeah.
actual proposal is.
Well, I can't speak for the city, but I mean, I would recommend you go with 100%. Personally, my recommendation would be that you do 100% CIP and have rates that are approved up to, for the CSD, 15% a year for 4 years and 10% for year 5. And then for ESD, it would be up to 19% for each of the next 5 years. With 100% in funding, fully funding your CIP as laid out by your city staff.
And I lean in support of that, but could you put the slide up again for the 75%?
Oh, so CSD 75% is, instead of the 15, 15, 10, it'd be 13, 12, 12, 12, and 10. It's not a lot difference, but a little bit. And then ESD, it'd be, instead of 19 across the board, it'd be 17, 16, 15, 14, and 10%.
Okay, thank you. One of the things I'd like to just summarize as far as how I see this, I think our goal, my goal would be to make a decision here that presents a scenario that's fully funded. I know that there's a lot of infrastructure unknowns. I think I take our infrastructure CIP really seriously. I think there's a lot of unknowns, and when we know them, we will need to be acting on them. So I think that based on those two opinions, I think it's a good idea to go for the 100% goal. And I like also the idea of characterizing it as up to a certain percentage, which gives us flexibility. I just really want to maybe put a point on the CIP. Maybe this has something to do with the question about what is our CPI that we're using to in our math. Can you recall what our CPI is? What is it that we're building in for
Yes.
escalation?
So basically, for the CIP work, I've assumed inflations of 10, 8, 6, 5, and 4, but then the general matches what the city's approved salary increases are, which is 5%, 4%, and then 2% for the next 3 years after that. I've left utilities, we don't have that completely pulled out exactly, but that is, we're assuming that SDG&E is not going to be coming down a lot on your rates increases, that they will
All right,
continue
good.
to. So 8, 7, 6, 6, and 5.
Okay, very good. That's it for me.
Councilman Raylers.
Yeah, and I want to echo a couple of things that my fellow council member said. The up to, absolutely, 100%. I'm actually with you on 100% CIP. I had the same question, so thank you for answering the question. I saw the expenditure increase percentages on one chart, but not on the other, but I assumed they were the same, and you then explained where they came from, so thank you. I do like I think the last time I mentioned, it's really a question of whose crystal ball you want to believe. And, you know, these are unusual times in my 40-year career, business career, very unusual times. And so I'm not as confident about that 4 and 5 year crystal ball. And so I would propose heading the route that Carlsbad did and adopted for 3 years. And I would do the 15, 15, 15 for ESD, 19, 19, 19 for CSD. Oh, did I say those backwards? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. I'm scribbling in my notes here. Okay, reverse that. But I wouldn't do the following 2 years because I think by then we'll have a much better idea of where the economy really is and where it's going. We'll also know what our reserves are doing. So it's a good conservative approach to the short-term reserves, short-term being 3 years. And I think it heads us down the right path, but then we absolutely should look at it again in 3 years. Now, I do understand, I think the cost of that is we have to do another 218 study, right? In this case, in unknown times, turbulent times, I just have trouble with going 19% 5 years straight. I know it's up to, but I'm just in the position where I think there's enough unknown that I'm ready to just say 3.
Okay, Councilmember Hensy.
Thank you. Yeah, my opinion hasn't changed much since the last meeting, and that was that we should fully fund our capital program. I'm in alignment with, are we council members in this capacity or board members? With Councilmember Lyons in basically everything that she said. I do think we should do the full 5 years to give some clarity that we don't expect rates to go down anytime soon, and I do appreciate including the up to, but I'm not opposed to revisiting the rates in 3 years and having a conversation about it again, because I think it was so long since the last time that we did this where we were all a little bit surprised. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell.
Yeah, I just wanted you to put up the slide again with the 3 years so we could see it. So if we did, as Councilmember Ehlers talked about, and funded it for 100%, but at the rates we were using for 5 years, that means we would have a deficit in the reserves at the end of 3 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, so let me show the
Yeah,
correct
it's 1,000
slide.
slides in.
So basically, it would be this slide, we would be, the cash balance at the end of year 3 would be 4.6 million versus the target of 5.3 million.
Yeah.
If we spend as we're projecting. That would be for CSD. In ESD, we would be down to about $4 million versus the $5 million for their targets.
And the gamble we're taking is we may underspend what we think in our capital program anyway, and therefore we wouldn't be at a deficit with reserves. Just in
Correct.
these financial projections, we'd be at a deficit.
Correct.
Correct? Okay. All right. That answered my question. Thank you. Maybe I should make a statement. I also agree with the up to percentages, funding it, CIP at 100%. I'm a little bit torn at this very moment about 3 or 5 years, but I agree it took a long time to do a study, so maybe doing a more frequent study is better and coming back at 3 years with that. And I'm more comfortable knowing what the deficit in reserves could look like, because that's, again, just a projection, which we may not realize. So thinking about this a little more.
Okay, thank you. So all of this discussion can be summarized in terms of the impact on the monthly budget on slide 22, is that correct?
I don't have my slide numbers on the
It's the one that
Yes,
says
yes.
monthly service rate comparison.
proposed rates. Yes.
So can you put that slide up?
CSD proposed. Oh, the one before it? That was before, and this is the first year's rate increase. Every other agency has rate increases at different times. Is that the one you're looking for? I'm sorry.
I'm looking for the one, I think this is the one, this is page 29, this is after, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so the monthly for ESD is 45.90, round up to 46. Cardiff is 48, and then you go back to the before. and
Yes,
these
this
folks are
one.
Paying 39, 24, and 42.50. So roughly $8 and $6 or so per month is what the customers are going to be feeling.
For the first year, yes.
For what, the first year?
For the first year, it's $6, the difference between $48 and $42.
And every year after that is probably going to be a similar increase?
A little bit more just
Compounding?
because of the percentages, yeah, 7, and then 8, and so on, because of the continuous percentage the same.
Yeah. And so there were a couple of ideas that have been discussed amongst us. One was 3 versus 5, and 100% versus 75%. I was leaning towards 75, but I heard a lot of folks support the 100. I can do that. I prefer the 5 with a 218 that specifies up twos so that we can adjust down if necessary. Obviously, if our estimates are off and we need to go back out for a greater increase, then that would mean another 218. But if we can do a single 218 and then use the history that we see over those 3 years to decide what to adjust it to after those 3 years, I think I support that. So that means, are we looking, let's see, I read what we were trying to do here. Review and discuss the sewer cost of service study, we did that. Review and discuss the city's capacity fee and sewer rates, we did that. And now we're to provide direction to staff on the presented rate scenario and capacity fees and advise staff of changes, if any, desired by council. And so this would be direction to start a 218 process. Remind me of how that works. You're going to bring back the 218 stuff?
Yeah, we will come back on the 28th with to request authorization for the Prop 218 public hearing, and that's when we start the Prop 218. Today's meeting, we would expect that we get some direction of the 5-year, the 100%, and the capacity fee, which one you select, so that we can include it in our final report before the 28th of this month.
And that public hearing will hold at a regular council meeting?
Yes, yes.
It might even be required by law, I would guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
We can't do a public hearing at a special meeting. So I would move that we direct staff to prepare a 218 process for a 5-year increase rate and 100% CIP, and make sure to include the language that it's up to. And with that, I would call on Councilmember Lyons.
I'll go ahead and second that. And I was just going to say, kind of add a little bit of my thoughts on the 3 versus 5-year goals, and you've already put forward the 5-year goal, but the 5-year goal presents a scenario that's fully funded, and I think there's a lot of comfort we can give to our community and to our constituents from the perspective of looking at what the need is over the 5 years and making a decision that fully funds it. And that's maybe a position that would be well received in the community. So I just wanted to add that additional thought. But yes, I have seconded your motion.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ayers.
And then I just wanted to see if a friendly amendment to add Kelly's comment that could we bring it back in 3 years, even with a 5-year plan, and then we're still under the 218 cover, but if we would formalize the motion to include that, I'd be happy.
I would formalize that. I probably would recommend we take it one step further and ask the city manager to make this discussion an annual discussion so that we know how we're doing, whether we're meeting the 100% CIP or not. If we're making 60%, there's other implications. There's reserves maybe excessive. There's a lot of stuff. And I think that one of the reasons we're in the situation that we're in is because we didn't have this conversation often enough.
Yep.
And
I would, that even better.
That's a good point.
So it sounds like you'll make the amendment to the motion.
Yeah, I don't mind adding it to the motion. I think that would probably have been staff direction, but can we, that's too many words. Okay, you got it. Okay, so that's in the motion.
And that's fine. That's acceptable from the seconder.
And then the only question I have is, what about the capacity fees?
Well, what? Let's vote on this and then,
And then go to capacity?
I don't know, his motion.
Do you want to do that, Mayor?
What's that?
You want to vote on this one and then do the capacity fees in the next motion?
Yes.
Okay, you ready to start voting? The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, and on to the capacity fees. Anybody want to make a motion on those?
I'll move approval of the consultant's recommendation.
I'll second.
just as clarity, that's future assets, that is what I'm recommending, basically CSD, that'd be 6,725, and ESD, 6,320.
Councilmember Ayers.
Did you have a second? I think, yeah, okay, great. I support it, especially when you look at that one chart on how way low we are.
Okay. Got a motion and a second.
Excuse me just one second. Technical difficulties. Oh, I'm just going to do a roll call vote so I can get this going. Councilmember Lyons?
Yes.
Councilmember Ayers?
Yes.
Councilmember Himsey?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell?
Yes.
And Mayor Krantz?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, very good. Seeing no more requests to speak, it appears that we've completed our business for today. So with that, this special meeting is adjourned. Thank you for all your efforts.
I will see you in 2 weeks.